So I was talking to my buddy and he mentioned I should tell the story on how I became a collector, and I was thinking, I've said it in passing a few times, but I don't ever think I told the story of how I actually became a game collector. I started lightly collecting in 2009. By lightly, I mean I bought an NES with some games, I bought an N64 with some games, mostly stuff that I grew up playing with. But I thought it would be fun to collect them here and there and find new games as I went along. But at the same time, I had a lot of other hobbies too that I was a lot more into, such as working on cars. I used to buy cars, fix them, flip them. I was huge into fishing. I had a boat. I'd always be out on the lake fishing when I wasn't working on cars. Fast forward a few years after that, I started picking up woodworking. I started buying tools. Every paycheck, wood, just messing around. And that's actually when I started my YouTube channel. If you go way back onto this channel, you can see it used to be nothing but a woodworking channel. And I do post some woodworking videos now, but it's all game related stuff. But back then, I was making woodworking videos and the channel was actually doing well. Some of those videos have thousands of views on them and they're really poor quality, so I don't know how they did so well. But although the channel was starting to become successful, something happened that changed everything, and that was getting orders to Japan. And when I got orders to Japan, I started thinking, what am I going to do over there? There's no garages, so I can't bring all my tools with me or my woodworking stuff, and I'm not going to have a boat. It's going to be an island because we were stationed in Okinawa, where it was just an island and nothing but seawater, and I'm not into sea fishing. I only like freshwater, like bass fishing. So as I'm sitting there thinking about it, realizing that there's no way I can do any of my serious hobbies over in Japan, I look over and I see some of my video games sitting there, and I'm like, hey, Japan is known for video games. I'll start collecting video games. And that's when I got really serious into collecting. And I remember some of the prices back then. For Stunt Racer, it was $23 to $30 loose depending on the condition. And yes, condition only made the difference of a few dollars back then. I remember seeing one Sculptor's Cut Loose sell for $66, but a lot of them were over $100, and I'm like, who would pay over $100 for a video game? They cost less than that when they were brand new. But that was my mentality when I became a brand new collector. So I wasn't ever sure how I was gonna get that game when I first started collecting Sculptor's Cut. But now $100 for a video game is pretty much a weekly occurrence. The majority of the games we're covering today were each over $100. And if you ever seen the Game Chasers on YouTube, when they first started doing their YouTube series, that's around the time that I started getting serious into game collecting. Boom! I know, I changed clothes. I got cut off while recording last night, so I'm just gonna pick up the story today. Where was I? Getting ready to move to Japan. Yeah, so with all this going on, getting ready to move to Japan, just becoming a collector and everything, that's when one of my biggest mistakes game collecting happened. But I'll get to that story another time, maybe next week or something. But anyways, yeah, I moved to Japan. The YouTube stopped. I didn't have any of my woodworking tools, none of my auto tools. So I just kind of laid off YouTube for a while, and I just started collecting anything and everything over there in Japan. Didn't matter to me if it was loose or complete in box. To me, it was all about just the games. So after a little while in Japan, I decided I wanted to pick up my YouTube channel again because it was doing good before I left. And I went out and bought a couple woodworking tools, made a couple woodworking videos, but they didn't do so hot. And then I started to get the idea to do game chasing videos out there in Japan. So not wanting to mess up my woodworking channel, I started another channel called So Much Gaming, and I started making a couple review videos and game chasing videos. I went to Tokyo and stuff like that, but it was growing a lot slower than my main channel. And at this point I started to do the N64 Complete in Box Quest 2 on that channel, and I really wanted it to take off a lot faster because of all the work that goes into those kind of videos. So I ended up changing my woodworking channel, this channel, into Gamer Wayne, and I moved all my videos over from So Much Gaming over to this channel here. And that didn't go over as well as I had hoped either, because as I was getting subscribers for video gaming, I was losing all my subscribers from woodworking. There was one point where I was actually losing a lot more subscribers than I was getting, and it was really depressing. So after I completed the N64 Complete in Box Quest, I started the NES Complete in Box Quest, and I was doing that until I left Japan. I spent 7 total years in Japan, and then I moved back to the States. And after moving back to the States, I don't remember if I put out any NES Complete in Box Quest videos or just a game room tour video, and I just started giving up on the channel, partly because it wasn't growing as fast as I wanted it to, and that's the same time I decided to sell my entire collection so I could buy a Lamborghini, which never happened, by the way. Prices were just so ridiculous back in 2021 for video games that I decided I wanted to go out and get this Lamborghini because the video games were worth that much, and they were. But before I decided to sell my video games, I had this conversation with my wife, and she gave me the green light. You know, it must have been her plan the whole time. So anyways, I ended up selling $80,000 out of my collection. Total I sold $125,000, but when I got up to $80,000, that's when my wife started having other ideas for the money. So instead of going out and paying cash for a Lamborghini, we decided to pay off our brand new truck that we bought when we moved back to the States instead. And then I ended up getting a boat, which the boat's gone now because I sold that so I could get my Mario statue. It was the responsible thing to do, and I did end up settling for my C7 Corvette. But at this time I still wasn't doing YouTube videos. It wasn't until I was deployed to Kuwait in 2022 when I'm sitting there and I get an email from YouTube or Google or whatever, and it says that it's changing my region from Japan to the United States. So the whole time I was over there in Japan, it was like my analytics were getting pushed out to Japanese people because I lived over in Japan and not in the US. And I researched it a little bit, and it takes 1 year to 2 years after you move to a new location for your location to update on a platform. Even after knowing that information, it still took me a while to start back up, just because I remember how much work these videos are. And I'm not 100% sure if that was the reason my channel was so slow growing. But it was enough to get me curious, and so I decided to start the channel up again, and now I'm doing the Super Nintendo Complete in Box Quest. And as of today, I'm over 1,000 subs, so thank you all for subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot. I do think there was a troll there for a second though, because I would hit 1,000, drop down to 999, back up to 1,000, drop back down. I don't know what was going on. It's like when you get to that threshold there, it was going up and down for a second. But I wouldn't be here without you guys, so thank you all very much. And today we have 5 games and a bunch of boxes that we'll be adding to the collection. Let's check them out. And the first game we have up is Sparkster. Sparkster was developed and published by Konami, rocketing into stores in 1994. Pretty standard story here. The princess is taken and you must go and rescue her. But don't write the game off just yet. Sparkster is a really good platformer. This is one of the few games I played through and beat long before I ever collected for the SNES. First off, the game looks excellent. The sprites are well defined and really detailed. You can actually see the enemy looking around, which I appreciate. There are a lot of Super Nintendo games that just have blank faces. The sound in the game is really clean too. The music and sound effects are really well done and complement the gameplay nicely. But we all know the thing that can break a platform game is the controls. but controls are definitely not an issue in this game. Sparkster handles excellent. Sparkster can rocket around, hang from platforms, and somersault through the air, and it all flows really smooth. The levels don't feel too long or too short, and it's just a fun experience all around. You get a password whenever you run out of lives, which will let you start back on the level you were on. Even the password system has a cool design. Sparkster is an easy game for the most part, but some of the later bosses can really give you a challenge. And if you run out of lives on them, you have to start the level over, so if you're like me, you can spend as much time on the last few bosses as you did the entire game. It's worth mentioning that there is a Sega Genesis version of the game that has the same name and cover art, but it's a completely different game than this one. Overall, Sparkster is a super fun game, and I highly recommend playing it if you're a fan of platformers. Sparkster is game number 90 for the collection, and I got it for $400 at a local game store. And at $400, that brings our total up to $17,490 for the Super Nintendo Complete in Box Quest. And the next game we have up is Super Buster Bros. Super Buster Bros was developed and published by Capcom, porting to the SNES in 1992. There are two modes to choose from, Tour or Panic. In either mode, bubbles are attacking the world and you must take them all out by popping them. In Tour mode, you have different obstacles to work around to pop bubbles. When you pop a bubble, it breaks down into smaller bubbles. If you pop too many bubbles at once, the screen turns into chaos. If you get hit just once by any bubble, you die. So it takes some strategy to complete each level. You also have a time limit, so the game gets pretty intense. Once you beat a level in Tour mode, you travel to the next destination to save it from attacking bubbles. You can find various power-ups in each level, such as an increased time limit or freezing the bubbles. It's such a relief when you freeze them, but they only freeze for a short time, so you gotta get to work when they're frozen. In Panic mode, you have constant bubbles forming that you have to take out. There's a bubble pop meter that must fill up, and when it's full, you move on to the next level. When you move up a level, the background changes pictures, which is kinda neat. The controls are about as simple as they come. The A, B, Y, and X buttons all fire the weapon, and the control pad is used to move. It didn't feel like the shooting always kept up with my button mashing though. The biggest flaw in the game is that it's only one player. It's called Super Buster Brothers, and all the other versions of the game had a two-player option. They should have changed the name to Super Buster Bro, or just kept it the same name they used everywhere else in the world, which was Pain. Super Buster Brothers is game number 91 for the collection, and I have $160 in trade for it. And at $160, that brings our total up to $17,650 for the collection. Now I will say that $160 for this game is way too much. So with a lot of these games that I got, I was just trading for them, and I didn't have time to sit there and look up the values for each and every one and make sure that they were spot on or anything. Most of the games were really well priced anyway, so I wasn't too worried about it. So what I have in trade for this game is probably double its value, as it's only about an $80 game. I also want to mention that a lot of prices have been dropping on Super Nintendo Complete in Box games, so it very well could have been $160 when I traded for it. And the next game up is Street Hockey 95. Street Hockey 95 was developed and published by GTE Software and slapped onto store shelves in 1994. Street Hockey 95 has a lot going for it. There are two practice modes where you can practice getting the controls down or practice a one-on-one game. You get 9 characters to choose from, each with their own strengths, but I didn't really notice any difference between the characters while playing. You have 6 shred zones to choose from, each with different obstacles in them that you'll have to avoid. The shred zones are well detailed and do a good job of putting you in the environment. Finally, there are 5 different games you can play, from Fat Point, where you have to be the first to score a certain amount of points to win, to Hot Puck, where the puck explodes after a certain amount of time, and Whack, where the nets are closer together and it focuses on your ability to quick turn and shoot. One other thing the game offers is a 4-player mode using the multi-tap. The visuals are decent. You can easily differentiate who is who on the court. The sound in the game is also decent. The music is heavy rock, but isn't really anything special. And the characters' voices are actually pretty clear. The controls are where the game goes downhill. They're super loose and it's really hard to control the players. There are ramps all around the sides of the court that act like a half pipe, so getting to the puck can be difficult if you accidentally skate into them. If the controls were better, this would be an awesome game. Overall, I had fun while playing the game, but it's not a game to go out of your way to play. Street Hockey 95 is game number 92 for the collection, and I found the manual first for $5 at the ARX game convention. Then I later found the box and card on eBay for $60 shipped, making our complete in box total $65. And at $65, that brings our total up to $17,715 for the SNES Quest. Next up we have a beat 'em up, the Combatribes. Combatribes was developed and published by Technos, imported to the SNES in 1992. The Big Apple has gone rotten and it's your job to find out who's at the core of it. So you choose one of 3 characters to take to the streets of New York to ask around. The levels are really short. You start each level fighting a wave of enemies and move on to a boss. But don't let the short levels fool you. Combatribes is a really difficult game. It's an arcade game, so it was designed to take your quarters. The moves are really cool in the game. Besides your standard punches and kicks, you can run and attack, swing enemies around knocking out other enemies, bash heads together with the right timing, stomp on enemies while they're down, and my favorite, getting on a downed enemy's back and repeatedly smash their head into the concrete. So satisfying. The graphics are good, but I'm not a huge fan of the way the sprites are shaped. That's just my own opinion though. The sound in the game is fine too. The game has a 2-player option, which I'd like to try sometime to see if the game gets any easier. Overall, Combatribes is a fun beat 'em up for the system. However, it's really difficult and there's better ones on the system. The Combatribes is game number 93 for the collection, and price charting has it at $135. And at $135, that brings our total up to $17,850 for the library. Last and least is Mecarobot Golf. Mecarobot Golf was developed by Advanced Communication Company and published by Toho. It released for the SNES in 1993. The story here is a robot named Eagle is designed to be the best golfer around. After the engineers try to enter him into a competition, he is met with resistance from the other golfers. So Eagle's sponsor buys him his own golf course to play on, but he isn't given a chance to display his ability. What a sad story. We've played a few golf games so far, and I have to admit this is one of the better looking games graphically. There is some choppiness, but not as bad as some of the other golf games. The controls are pretty straightforward, and it's one of the easier systems to master. You just hit the B button to start the power meter, B to set the power, and B again to set the angle. The game does have its flaws. At first I couldn't even play the game. If there are already 4 profiles and you try to start a new game, it goes into a loop of selecting your name and back to the receptionist. Super annoying. The buttons didn't seem to always function properly in the game either. Another awful thing is if you miss the ball when you swing, it still counts as a stroke. I can't lie to the game and say it was just a practice swing. Finally, you have to watch Eagle play the whole game. You can't fast forward past his shots, so the game can really drag on. One nice thing is there's music in the game, unlike the other golf games we played, but it's nothing memorable. Overall, Mecarobot Golf is a mediocre golf game. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. Mecarobot Golf is game number 94 for the collection, and I have $30 in trade for it. And at $30, that brings our total up to $17,880 for the Super Nintendo Complete in Box Quest. Finally, I got this huge stack of 23 boxes and 4 manuals to add to the collection. I got them in the mail today, and it was only $23 shipped. And the reason for that is the listing didn't say how many boxes were actually included. There was some duplicates in it, and the pictures were really bad. But I took a risk for $23, and man, it really paid off. And we're gonna add these to the price counter, and after I sell the duplicates, I'll take them off the price counter. So at $23, that brings our total up to $17,903 for the collection. Let's get these games on the shelf. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe. I'm completing the entire Super Nintendo library, complete in box, right here on this show. Also, make sure to leave a thumbs up for the awesome box lot we got. Until next time, I'm Gamer Wayne, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.